Our God is a mountain mover, and He's still moving mountains every day. And the good news is, He can move your mountains too. Hi there, this is Sue Cooper. Welcome to It's a God Thing radio program. Thanks for joining us today. You're about to hear some awesome interviews with believers in Jesus Christ who will tell you how God has revealed and proved Himself to them by moving mountains they were unable to move by themselves. They say that their stories can only be described as a God thing. Ready for a blessing? Let's roll. Here's our host, Chuck Cooper, with a great God thing story.
We're here with Dr. Ernest Easley, who is the pastor at Roswell Street Baptist Church in Marietta, Georgia. Dr. Easley contracted throat cancer because of secondary smoke. And so he has a difficult time as he travels and talks and finding a no smoking room. And he has one particular story that he shared with his congregation about how difficult it was and how God is so gracious in working it out. So God can even help you find a no smoking room, right, Dr. Easley?
You know, He did, and I give Him all the credit for it. It is very difficult for me to go to a hotel. I have to be in a non-smoking room. I did get throat cancer from secondhand smoke, but since that all happened, if I'm in a room where there has been smoking or smoking going on, it literally shuts me down breathing wise. It's hard to explain, but I can't be in a room very long at all before I can't breathe, and I have to get out of there. So, going to a hotel, my wife generally makes reservations for me, and to ensure that we have a non-smoking room. Well, not long ago, we went down to South Georgia for our state convention, and it starts on Monday and finishes on Wednesday. But I decided to go down a day early to be a part of the preaching conference, which is on Sunday night. So we drove down to South Georgia and went to our hotel, and I said, I'm Ernest Easley, and I'm here to check in. And they typed in something, and they said, well, you don't have a reservation for tonight, but you do tomorrow night and for the following days. And I said, well, I'm a day early. I said, is that a problem? And they said, no, it won't be a problem. And I said, now, I need a non-smoking room. And she said, I've got us a non-smoking room for you tonight. But after tonight, you'll have to move out of that room and move into another room. That's not a non-smoking room. And I said, well, I've made a reservation for a non-smoking room. Well, I've learned that you can make a reservation for a non-smoking room. That's not a guarantee you're going to get one. Mm-hmm. Okay? Especially when you've got conventions and things going on when the hotel is packed.
Sure.
Okay. So I said, well, okay, I'll take the room, and we'll try to find another place to go for tomorrow night. So we unload the car, and we go up to the room and start unloading our stuff. And I told Julie, I said, we got to check out of here by like 11 tomorrow morning, and that's right in the middle of the conference. And we'll have to leave the convention center, drive all the way back out here. I said, let's see if we can go ahead and find another hotel room tonight so we don't have to change hotel rooms tomorrow.
Sure.
And so she got on the phone, and she found one not far from where we were. So within like 30 minutes, we're checking out of the hotel. And I said, we're going to go ahead and check out. We found another hotel that has a non-smoking room the whole time that we're here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we checked out. So we got all of our luggage, got it back in the car, and drove maybe less than a half a mile to the second hotel. And so I got the stuff out of the car, went to the front desk, and said, hey, we called a few moments ago for a non-smoking room. I'm Ernest Easley, and I'm here for my room. And they typed some things in, and she looked up at me. She said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have any non-smoking rooms.
Oh, no.
And I said, well, 20 minutes ago you had one. And they said, well, we've given that room away in that 20-minute period. She said, sir, we got all kind of conventions here in town. Every hotel's booked. And I said, so you're telling me there's not a non-smoking room tonight? She said, no, sir, there's no non-smoking room. And I looked at my wife and I said, we just left the other hotel where there is a non-smoking room
right.
that now we have lost. and we're stuck now in this smoking room for tonight and tomorrow night, the next night, and the next night. And she said, "Sir, why don't you go up to the room? We've had it aired out, and see if it will work." So I got the key, and I went up to the room, and Julie stayed in the lobby. And went up there, opened the door. I walked in within 10 seconds. I knew this is not going to work.
Right.
And I said, I came back down. I said, "Ma'am, this is not going to work." I said, "I got to have a non-smoking room." She said, "Well, I'm sorry. That's the best we have." And so I looked at Julie and I said, "So what do we do?" She said, "Well, we could make some more phone calls and see if we can find another hotel, or we could go ahead and get this room to guarantee we got a room for the night, and then see if we can find another place." And I said, "Well, I was getting tired. I preached that morning. I drove 5 hours down there. I've already left one hotel, so I'm in the second hotel." And I said, "Let's make a few phone calls first." So we sat in the lobby of the hotel and started making some phone calls. I even checked some bed and breakfast, but they were like 40 miles away.
Oh, boy.
Okay, and I said, "Well, I don't want to do a 40-mile trip, one way." And so we got there and we're talking, making phone calls, and she said, "We found one. It's X miles away." I said, "Great." So I got all our stuff out of the lobby, and I loaded it back in the car, and we drove over to the other hotel. And we got there, and I was so relieved, and this is going to be so good. And I said, "I'm Ernest Easley. I'm here for the room." And yeah, we have the room. I said, "That's a non-smoking room, right?" And she looked at me. She said, "No, it's not a non-smoking room."
Oh, no.
I said, "Ma'am, I got to have a non-smoking room. And you said on the phone, not just a few moments ago, that you had one." She said, "I'm sorry, we don't have any more." And by the way, I had unloaded the car again.
Yeah, of course.
Because we had the room there. Okay, so there I stood in the lobby of the third hotel that night, and with my things, and I said, "Well, let me go up and look at I went up to the room, same deal, and I came back down, and I said, "Julie, let's just take the room." I said, "We'll just stay out all night and just come in and just get as little sleep as possible, so I don't have to be in this room." So we went up to the room, unloaded our stuff again, and I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to get through this night? I mean, not just this night, but I got 3 nights. It's going to be a horrible experience. But at this point, I didn't have any choice. So we unloaded everything, and we headed to the convention center, which was probably a 20-minute drive. So we got to the convention center and walked in, went to the exhibit area, and I went to one area where there was a girl working there that I grew up with in Texas.
Oh, wow.
In fact, her grandfather was my pastor.
Oh, isn't that something?
And I went to high school with her and her brother. So I've known this girl for years and years and years.
Sure.
And I knew she worked for the Georgia Baptist Convention. But anyway, I saw her and I walked over and she hugged me and I hugged her and we stood there and talked for a while. And her name is Julie. And I said, "Julie, you're not going to believe what I've been to tonight." I told her the whole episode between 3 different hotels I'd been in. And she looked at me and she said, "You're not going to believe this." She said, "But the Georgia Baptist Convention has a block of rooms at the Hilton. And I think there's one room left that's a non-smoking room." She said, "Let me go check."
Oh, wow.
And I looked at my wife, Julie, and I said, "Could it be? Is it even possible?" And at this point, I was somewhat getting irritated.
Yes, okay? No kidding.
And so my friend Julie came back. She said, "I got great news." She said, "We got one." She wrote down the number to guarantee it, confirmation number. And she said, "Take that. I've already given me your name. We called the Hilton. They're waiting for you." So we got back in the car, drove back to the hotel, loaded our stuff up.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Got
it's
everything back.
Be a habit, you know.
I'm getting good at it. I'm very fast now. Every time I did, I got faster every time I did.
I'll bet.
So we got everything back in the bags and threw them all back in the back seat of the car, and we took off for the Hilton. And it was probably about a 25-minute drive on the other end of town. And it was so nice. So we drove up, and right across the front of the hotel, there was a park. And it had Ray Charles sitting like a bronze.
Yes,
right. Ray Charles. He's sitting at a piano, and there's music signs going off around, and it has a waterfall and lights. And I said, well, looky here, honey. There's a park. Ray Charles is right there at the park, right across the street there. So I was feeling pretty good about things, you know. And I walked in, carrying my bags, and got to the desk, and lady said, can I help you? I said, oh, yes, ma'am. I said, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to being here tonight. She said, well, good. It's good to have you. She said, do you have a name? I gave her my name, confirmation number. She said, okay, we have a room. And with great reservation, I asked. I said, now, is this a non-smoking room? With great confidence, knowing she was going to say, well, of course it is. She looked at me and she said, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
It's not a non-smoking room.
Oh, my goodness.
I said, ma'am, I'm leaning into the counter now, okay? I said, this is the 4th hotel I've been in tonight. And they told me that this was a block of rooms for the Georgia Baptist Convention, and it was a guaranteed non-smoking room. She said, sir, there are many conventions in town. Every room is taken, and every room in this hotel is taken. This is all we have.
Oh, my.
And I leaned over and I said, let me ask you a question. I said, if President Obama walked in this door and he needed a room in this hotel, what would you say to him? She, without blinking an eye, she said, I'd say, Mr. President, you're going to have to sleep with Ray out at the park across the street because we don't have any more rooms in the hotel.
That was quick.
Yeah, that was pretty quick, I have to admit. And I said, well, I said, I don't really have a choice. Well, while we're doing all this, there was a group of people to my right, 4 or 5 people, maybe 3 men, 2 women. They were checking in the hotel, and there was some type of a convention in town. And as I was having this dialogue with this woman at the counter, and she was giving me my key,
right.
The 4th key of the night, a woman turned to me, and she said, excuse me. She said, I think I know you. And I looked at her, Chuck, like a cow looking at a new gate.
Right.
And I looked at my wife and I said, honey, I don't know her. And my wife looked at her and my wife looked at me and she looked at my wife. And I said, how do I know you? She said, didn't you preach earlier this year, like in March, up at Cedartown College in Ohio? I looked at her and I said, you know, I did.
You got to be kidding.
She said, I recognized your voice. She said, God spoke to me in a great way that night when you preached in Ohio in March of this year. I said, what are you doing here? She said, I'm here for a convention. I said, you got to be kidding me. She said, no. And we've already checked in and we're just going out to eat. And she looked to the lady at the counter. She said, ma'am, this man here is a preacher of the gospel. She said, I want to give my room to him, which is a non-smoking room, and I'll take his smoking room because it doesn't matter to me one way or the other.
Isn't that something?
And the lady looked at me and looked at her, and she said, ma'am, are you sure you want to give up your room? And she said, yeah. And the lady looked at me and she said, it's the jacuzzi room.
Oh, wow.
She said, not only is it a non-smoking room, it has a jacuzzi in the room. And she said, Pastor, I would love for you to have my room. So we stood there and exchanged keys, the 5th key of the night, and I got the non-smoking room at the Hilton that night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night, because of how God provided. You know, you think about the timing of all that.
Oh, yeah.
How, number one, I was faithful to preach God's word up in Ohio. She was there. God spoke to her. She happened to be in the lobby this exact second that I was checking in that lobby. And I didn't see her the rest of the time I was there, by the way. That was the only time I saw that woman.
Do you know who she is?
I have no idea who she was.
No name, no nothing?
I don't
so
have,
you could write her a thank you note?
Nothing. I mean, I thanked her right there. But I didn't even think about getting her address to write her a thank you note. I mean, I was thanking her right there.
Well, you're pretty tired by that time.
You know what, Chuck? I wasn't thinking real clear, to be honest with you.
I bet you weren't.
We made our way up to the elevator, and I said, isn't God good taking care of us like this?
Boy, he sure is.
Absolutely.
Ernest, would you say that you getting that non-smoking room after all these difficulties and that God providing this room for you through this lady, would you say that's a God thing?
Listen, it has God's thumbprint all over it.
Does it ever? What a great story.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Glad to be able to tell it.
Wow, what a great story. I don't know about you, but we here at It's a God Thing Radio are both inspired and encouraged and even awed when we hear stories like the one you're hearing today. We think God Thing stories prove to all who hear them how God continues to work every day in the lives of His believers. We also believe strongly that sharing God Thing stories with not yet believers might just cause them to remember similar events in their own lives. Hopefully, those remembrances will cause them to consider that there may be something to God and Jesus after all. Sharing your own God Thing story, yes, your own story, is a great way to witness to your family, friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and even strangers. Who won't listen when you begin a conversation by saying, "My goodness, you won't believe what happened to me a while back," or, "Gosh, I'm so excited about what happened to a couple at our church. Let me tell you about it." Then tell your own story or share one you've heard here. Doing so just might cause someone to accept Jesus as Savior and Lord. Now let's get back to today's program. You know, most of us are really awed when we hear a very dramatic story about how God has removed a huge mountain in the lives of believers. But you know what? He can take care of those little mountains too, those little bumps in the road that have the potential to become a huge mountain. And the neat thing is that many times He does it without us even knowing about it until after everything is all over and the situation has been resolved. I want to share a personal example with you today to explain what I'm talking about. And you may remember some things in your own life just like this. And this isn't very dramatic, but it just explains how God is in control when we let Him be. Sue and I took a 3-week road trip, 2,500 miles, all the way from Marietta, Georgia, up to Glacier National Park in Montana. And as we were backing into the employee campground space that was assigned to us, all of a sudden my air brakes locked up, and I couldn't move the coach. I had to use an override button to wiggle it into the camp site, and once we got all hooked up, I tried to check out and see what I thought the problem might be. Had no clue. So I called the Freightliner chassis manufacturer and asked what the situation can be. He explained to me that there were several options. It could have been the governor, it could have been a new compressor, it could have been an air leak somewhere, but he couldn't really tell that I really needed to have it checked out. When I explained to him that the nearest RV dealer was over 100 miles and I was in the Rocky Mountains, he said, "No, that rig isn't safe. Don't even think about driving that rig. It's not safe at all. You need brakes, and you don't want to break down in the middle of the mountains there." So I said, "Okay, well, thank you very much." So I checked around and discovered that in Cutbank, Montana, 50 miles to the east of us, was a Cummins certified dealer, and so I drove over there and talked with him, and he said, "Well, sure, I can help you, and I can fix it. Don't really have any clue what the problem is until I check it out. But let me ask you something. Do you know a fellow over at Glacier National Park named Bob Wilson?" And I said, "No, I've only been here a couple of days, and I really haven't met him yet." He said, "Well, let me tell you, you might want to go look him up and check with him. He might be able to analyze things for you." And then he explained that for him to come over to analyze things, he was going to have to charge me $2 a mile each way. And he said, "But, Bob may be willing to come over and check it out." So I immediately went back and went and looked up Bob, introduced myself, and told him what the situation was. And a very nice, polite young man, and he said, "Well, sure. I've been working on motorhomes and trucks and everything all my life, and I'll be glad to come over, but I'll have to come over on my own time, and it's probably going to be a week or so before I can get over there." So I said, "Well, that's fine. Come on anytime. Just let me know." Well, one day he showed up, and about 7 o'clock at night, and he said, "Let's take a look at this thing." fire it up. So I fired it up, and air pressure would not get up to a safe level. And he said, all right, shut it down. I said, you got a leak somewhere. So with his background and knowledge, we walked around the rig, and then he said, oh, yeah, I hear a leak. Can you hear it? Well, I couldn't hear it, but his trained ear could. So he climbed underneath, and the first thing he checked out was the main air hose coming from the compressor. Discovered that it was had been rubbing up against the frame, and it created a little hole in there, and that's where the air was coming from. So, however, it took Bob and I both about an hour and a half to take that hose off, and we finally had to use a Sawzall to cut it off. And I said, okay, now what do I do? Where do I need to go to get a hose? He said, well, they'll have to make one for you, and go right back over there to that place in Cutbank, and they'll make you one. But make sure that it's just exactly the same fittings and all that. So I did, and he did, and it's back on and working great. What I really want to share with you is Bob's reaction when I first went to him. He said, yeah, I'll be glad to come over and help you. A little bit hesitant. And so when we got finished putting it back on, he said, you know what, Chuck? God spoke to me and told me you needed some help. You're a believer, aren't you? And I said, boy, I sure am. He said, well, let me explain to you how God has taken care of you. This happened here at Glacier National Park. You could get into your campsite. But how expensive would it have been if you had broken down on your way up here or in the mountains somewhere? That would have been a tremendous expense to you, and you'd had to tow it. And so God blessed you by having this happen here. Well, immediately I recognized that was true. And I said, now, Bob, I need to pay you and want to pay you for your services. You have helped me out of a tight. And he said, that ain't going to happen. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Chuck, I realized that you were probably a believer. My whole family, my 5 children, my wife and me, are very devout believers. And God spoke to me right after you left and said, you need to go over and help that fella. Folks, that's a little thing. It could have been very expensive for us, but it didn't, because God was at work even when we didn't know it, and allowed the problem to rear its ugly head while we were stationary and where we could find help. So, yes, God can move big mountains, but he can prevent those little bumps in the road from becoming huge obstacles too. Here's a story sent to us by Pete Cutts in Franklin, Tennessee, which suggests that we need to be careful about what we ask for. An atheist was hiking through the woods at Glacier National Park, taking in the incredible scenery. My, what tremendous mountains, he thought, what majestic trees, what powerful rivers, and what beautiful animals. As he walked along Swift Current Creek, he suddenly heard a rustling in the bushes behind him. Looking, he saw a 7-foot grizzly bear charging towards him. Scared to death, he ran as fast as he could up the pathway, but as he looked over his shoulder, he saw that the bear was closing in on him. He looked over his shoulder again, and the bear was even closer. Then he tripped and fell on the ground. He rolled over to pick himself up, but saw that the bear was right on top of him, reaching for him with his left paw and raising his right paw to strike him. At that instant, the atheist cried out, "Oh, my God!" Time stopped. The bear froze. The forest was silent. As a bright light shone upon the man, a voice came from the heavens. "You deny my existence for all these years, teach others I don't exist, and even credit creation to cosmic accident? Do you expect me to help you out of this predicament? Am I to count you as a believer?" The atheist looked directly into the light and said, "Well, it would be hypocritical of me to suddenly ask you to treat me as a Christian now, but perhaps you could make the bear a Christian." "Very well," said the voice. The light went out, the sounds of the forest resumed, and the bear dropped his right paw, brought both paws together, bowed his head, and spoke. "Lord, bless this food which I am about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen." Be careful what you ask for. We'd like to close the show today with a reading by Sweet Sue, my wife of 48 years, who has found a special story that she'd like to share with you. Honey, thanks for being with us today.
Share with our audience what's on your heart.
You're special. In all the world, there's nobody like you. Nobody has your smile. Nobody has your eyes, nose, hair, or voice. You're just special. No one laughs like you or cries like you. No one sees things just as you do. No one reacts just as you react. You're special. You're the only one in all creation who has your set of abilities. Your unique combination of gifts, talents, and ability are an original symphony. You're special. You really are. And you're rare. And in all rarity, there is great value. You need not imitate others. You will accept, yes, celebrate your differences. You are special. And I'm beginning to see that God made you special for a very special purpose. God has a job for you that no one else can do as well as you do. Out of all the applicants, only one is qualified. That one is you, because you're special.
Got a problem in my pathway. I feel a frozen.
Wow, what a great half hour this has been. Tune in next time for more great God Things stories, and tell all your friends to tune in too. Oh yeah, one more thing. If you or someone you know has a verifiable story which needs to be told, please email a brief summary to us at mystory@itsagodthingradio.com. That's my story, all one word, at itsagodthingradio.com. See you next time.